Hey, Patrick.
Hey, how you doing, Michael J?
I am doing good. I'm also doing well, but I'm doing good, and the good that I'm doing today is to bring some Masters 25 preview cards to the world along with you.
Of course,
we are bringing some Masters 25 preview cards. Two of them. The first being Courser of Kruphix.
Yes, a little ditty very near and dear to my heart. Courser of Kruphix, Swoon. Courser of Kruphix is definitely one of the... I mean, I think it's pretty widely agreed to be a centerpiece of the universally... what would you say? Just universally shared view that Courser of Kruphix was a centerpiece of the most skill testing constructed format of all time.
Do you mean Pro Tour Journey into Nyx?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think Theros block constructed is, inarguably the pinnacle of Magic's constructed play.
Oh, tell me more, Patrick. Was there perhaps a Pro Tour that featured Theros block constructed?
Yeah. And Courser of Kruphix is, and I love that Courser of Kruphix is making waves in Modern these days. You know, like sometimes it can take certain standard superstars a little while to catch on in Modern, and sometimes it just takes slight tweaks and twists in the format. I think that Courser of Kruphix has particularly, good prospects for the months to come because of both Bloodbraid Elf and Jace the Mind Sculptor. You know, it was already appealing because of fetch lands and because of things like the sheer quantity of utility lands that you had access to, or ways to reshuffle your deck like Knight of the Reliquary. But the recent unbanning of both Bloodbraid Elf and Jace the Mind Sculptor bodes very well for Courser of Kruphix.
Yeah, so at least 3 or 4 different things that you touched on that I think are worth, even briefly dwelling on for Modern. Courser of Kruphix with fetch lands, obviously 2 things going on there. One, when you play a fetch land, you gain a life when you play it with Courser of Kruphix. And then when you break the fetch land, you pay a life, right? But then you get another life back when the next land comes into play, provided that you have one in your library that's appropriate to find. So, especially with multiple coursers in play, you can get a little bit of a life gain engine there, but you have some good net with fetch lands, and that's in particular important because Courser of Kruphix allows you to see the top card of your library. So if there's not a land on the top of your library, you might get a shuffle for a free card advantage. But then it's a 3 casting cost creature in green, so when you play Bloodbraid Elf, it's eligible for the Cascade on Bloodbraid Elf, which is awesome. But perhaps most exciting, Courser of Kruphix and Jace the Mind Sculptor. Courser of Kruphix on turn 3 with 4 toughness. You play it on turn 3, you follow up with Jace the Mind Sculptor on turn 4. Awesome combination there with a relatively high toughness creature to defend Jace. And then ongoing over the course of the game, Jace and Courser are best buddies. Whether you're fate sealing, whether you're brainstorming with Jace, you can adjust the top cards of your library, which can put a land on top for the Courser, which will dig you deeper, which will make Jace better, which will make Courser better. It's just an unbelievable combination of 2 very good cards that are, in particular, real good together.
Well, yeah, absolutely. They're also both sheer pleasure. You know what I mean? Like in terms of being able to draw extra cards, defend yourself, have a million decisions that all lead you to having a bigger advantage every turn. But I think that there's a little bit more subtlety to the Bloodbraid Elf Courser of Kruphix interaction that warrants a second look. Bloodbraid Elf, obviously flipping Courser of Kruphix is nice. Every time you play every time you flip a 3-cost card off of the Bloodbraid Elf, you're typically, just getting a little bit more bang for your buck than when you flip 1s and 2s. But Courser of Kruphix, letting you see the top of your deck, actually lets you set up your Bloodbraid Elf even better, right? Like, so when you see that you have an Ancestral Visions on top of your deck, well, that's the time to Bloodbraid Elf. Or if you see the top of your deck is something that you actually want, but you don't want to, but it's just a 1-cost card, you might use a cantrip to get it first. Or you might, if you see the top of your deck is a removal spell and your opponent doesn't have any creatures in play, then you might shuffle away first. There's having knowledge of what the Bloodbraid Elf would hit before committing to it is actually deceptively powerful.
Oh, yeah. Super, super awesome there. Like, Bloodbraid Elf is so often played with cards like Path to Exile, Terminate, etc. And if the opponent doesn't have a creature, or, sometimes it's played with permission even. If the opponent doesn't have a thing that you can interact directly with, then the Bloodbraid Elf's additional, theoretical card advantage is just wasted. You just get a 3/2 haste creature for 4 instead of, one of the more powerful creatures in the history of that color combination. But separately from that, Courser of Kruphix is the maximum casting cost of a card that can be flipped over and cast successfully via Bloodbraid Elf's Cascade. So, you always used to say, and this is the way I think about it, is Bloodbraid Elf gives you 2 cards. People think about it that Bloodbraid Elf only gives you 1 card, right? It gives you 2. Just in the case of Courser of Kruphix, you're getting Courser of Kruphix and Black Lotus, right? But if you were to get Lightning Bolt, for example, right? Lightning Bolt's also a good card, or Noble Hierarch, right? That's a card that is often played with Bloodbraid Elf. You're just getting, like, Noble Hierarch and Lotus Petal, right? So it's actually much more powerful of a card you're getting if you get Black Lotus than if you're getting Lotus Petal.
Sure. Here's another interaction for you with Courser of Kruphix in terms of recent events. Like Courser of Kruphix with stuff like Merfolk Branchwalker or Jadelight Ranger. Obviously Merfolk Branchwalker and Jadelight Ranger have already been making waves in Standard, but it's not clear that you can't run them in Modern. I mean, they show up a little bit in the various Merfolk decks, but I can't help but wonder if there might be a spot for Jadelight Ranger and Courser of Kruphix fighting side by side, particularly when you can get a little extra mileage out of your Explorer, thanks to Courser of Kruphix knowing when. Obviously you'll just play the land off the top if it's your first land for the turn. But when you've got fetch lands, and it's not actually that unreasonable to get yourself to a spot where there's a second land on top of your deck. And knowing that your Explorer is going to actually hit a land, can be a nice way to just keep the card flow going.
Do you think that if you're going to play cards like Merfolk Branchwalker and Jadelight Ranger alongside Courser of Kruphix, you might play them with Winding Constrictor?
That's interesting.
Right?
That's definitely.
Like you said before, if there's a land on top of your library, you're very likely to just play it with the Courser of Kruphix for the free card advantage. Because, just getting the land with the Merfolk Branchwalker, for example, it's not really card advantage because the Courser of Kruphix would have given you access to it anyway, right? So it's not extra. But let's say there's a card that you have there, that even one that you don't want, the Courser shows it to you, and then, like in the case of a Jadelight Ranger, you can reveal it and then leave it on top and gain multiple +1/+1 counters thanks to some help from the Winding Constrictor, and then reveal it again and then put it into your graveyard, get it out of the way, just to ensure size, and then maybe the Courser is going to be there to take advantage of a land that comes on top. Because you in this case, you really don't want to be getting lands with those Explore creatures.
One of my favorite interactions with Courser of Kruphix is stuff like Domri Rod. Imagine you got Domri Rade or whatever. Like if you've got any of the different planeswalkers that benefit from knowing the top of your deck, where they've got there's a partial card draw. For instance, Nissa, the new X-Spell Nissa. If you've got Nissa, you really like knowing the top of your deck, and obviously her own Scry ability can help set that up. But if you have Courser of Kruphix, sometimes that gets you actually, you can be ahead of schedule even more, where you can actually just know that you're for sure going to hit and not even need to do the Scry. And Domri Rod, if you know that you have a creature on top of your deck from the Courser, well, there you go. That's the perfect time to use Domri's +1 ability. If you have a Chandra. If you have a Chandra, sometimes when you know the top of your deck is a spell you really want and not a land, if it's a land, you can just play it from the Courser. You don't want to always have your Chandra flipping and dealing too. Sometimes you just really want to have another threat. So Courser can help you time your Chandra exactly at the right times.
So those are all great points. But again, we have a case where the Courser can come down, in front of a Chandra, potentially in front of a Domri Rod, has that toughness to defend your Planeswalker / card advantage engine. And in the case of Domri Rod, right, you have to play such a high concentration of creature spells. And here's a case where you have a creature that can interact with Domri Rod on the other side, can defend Domri Rod, and then is also, highly synergistic with Domri Rod's other abilities.
Two other things I wanted to kind of just highlight for a second with Courser. First, 2/4 is a very efficient body in Modern these days. Being able to survive Lightning Bolt and Lightning Helix, that's just such a big deal. And second, though, and this is an important one, it's more often a drawback, but it can be a big advantage. Courser of Kruphix is an enchantment. This means that it's vulnerable to stuff like wear and tear, but on the flip side, it synergizes with basically any card that gives you, if you have, whether it's an Eidolon of Blossoms or if you're basically any kind of enchantment call out. Courser of Kruphix has a little bit of extra texture to it.
Speaking of creatures / enchantments and the efficiency of a 2/4 creature in Modern, I'm not embarrassed to say that I have on more than one occasion hurled my Eidolon of the Great Revel into a Courser of Kruphix, waited for it to die, and then used some kind of lightning bolt to kill the Courser of Kruphix. I have done it. It's like, well, this is terrible. At least I'm going to wait until my guy is dead before I use this removal spell so I don't take 2. But the way that the board is going, he stands to gain way more than 2.
Sure. But we have 2 preview cards for the upcoming Masters 25. Courser of Kruphix, obviously a good time, but...
Yep, there's another one with brand new art, right? So it is Coalition Relic.
Coalition Relic. Talk about a classic. I mean, Coalition Relic was for 5 color. It was like the 5 color control enabler before there was 5 color control. It's Coalition Relic it's one of the most interesting mana rocks from a gameplay standpoint. The amount of planning, of sculpt, trying to figure out what do you want to do this turn, what do you want to do next turn, how much do you want to build up, how much do you want to save up, when are you going to have big turns, and when are you going to take a turn off to regroup?
Yeah, the card had really, really diverse paths that it could take you on. Because, one play pattern is just to play the Coalition Relic, which costs 3, and then you have access to 1 mana there, right? So you could play the Coalition Relic, and then this wasn't in block, I don't think, but you could just tap it for R and cast a Lightning Bolt. Some equivalent of that, right? You just tap it for a single color and do a 1 cast and cost spell. Or, which I think was more common, you would use the second ability on Coalition Relic and then put the charge counter on, even if that charge counter didn't always get used the next turn. You would often do this because having the charge counter on your Coalition Relic, you have it on 3, then you're going to play your 4th land. The Coalition Relic gives you a mana that's 5, and then the charge counter is 6. It gives you a pretty robust turn 4 from a mana acceleration standpoint. You could cast a Dragon Legend the next turn, in Times Square Block. You could cast a Volver with 2 kickers, right? You could flash back a Mystical Teachings. There were a number of things that you could do that were, pretty expensive, that weren't, if your opponent passes his turn 2 or 3, doesn't necessarily assume you're going to cast a 6 on turn 4.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that the 1 mana counter spells were particularly interesting with Coalition Relic. Like Spell Snare, for instance. Spell Snare was a particularly sweet card, so that when you dropped Coalition Relic, you could be threatening to play a piece of interaction that turn, but you could also just charge the Relic. Likewise, Coalition Relic could also be used on turn 4 Or if you played like a 2-mana accelerator, like a prismatic lens or anything in that space, dropping the relic on turn 3 can actually leave you in a spot where you've got something like, for instance, Rune Snag or some kind of a 2-mana counterspell that you're holding open. And if they don't walk into it, well, no problem. Charge your Coalition Relic.
Yeah. I think that you hit the nail right on the head earlier on with this, which is that, like, because it taps for so many different colors of mana, you could just do wild stuff, having this as your primary fixer, right? Like, typically played in blue or green or, you know, blue-black decks, but you could have access to white, you could have access to red. I think a not uncommon strategy might have been to play, like, Ana Battle Mage, a creature that costs 2G for a 2/2, but has both blue and black kickers. That's like a crazy card to coming out of block, out of Planar Chaos. It was I think same set as Coalition Relic, but it's like all of a sudden you just have access to all these different colors.
So Coalition Relic was actually the center. That was the backbone of my of the teachings deck that I use. Like so this is like a decade ago. I think it was 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2007. Maybe it was 2007. Anyway, I played a 5-color Corlash teachings deck at Nationals and won the standard portion. The deck itself was largely a blue-black control deck, but it splashed green for Tarmogoyf and red for what I don't even recall what all my red was. I know I had Ancient Grudge at the very least, and then I also had white for Beacon of Immortality. And this is in large part just because of what Coalition Relic does for you. You know, where you can actually be playing a Corlash deck with lots of counter spells and still play all the other colors.
Now, yeah, Corlash is a swamps-intensive creature, right? So for those who have never played with Corlash, it's 2 BB for a forecasting cost legendary creature. He's XX, where his power and toughness is equal to the number of swamps you control. But he has like a pretty cool ability, which is if you discard another card named Corlash Heir to Blackblade to him, you can search your library for 2 more swamps. So he's pretty cool. Like if you had lots of swamps, he was big, and then he could make himself bigger, and he was also a card advantage engine. I remember that weekend. It was so awesome. It was when you came up to New York prior to Nationals, hung out with me and the fam, and then I went to work, and you went and made that Nationals standard winning deck at Johnny's the next day, right? Like just ground against the Great One. Well, I guess the Great One is Bob Maher, but the greatest.
Yes. But do you think Coalition Relic's got much of a place in Modern now? It's always something to consider, but where does it even get played now? It occasionally shows up in some big mana decks, right?
I don't think it's going to be a big format splash in Modern. Like if you think about it, the decks that want to pay 3 casting cost for accelerators, they typically have, you know, either options that are going to get multiple, you know, permanents in play at once, you know, something along the lines of a Kodama's Reach, or they have, you know, like a Search for Tomorrow, which also has the alternate ability to be played for 1 mana. And its power is really, really strong, but I think it doesn't give you what you want when you're facing against like the speed and interaction of of Modern decks that we see right now. Like, I think you don't want to take your 3rd turn off to play this. You're kind of, I don't know, if you have like really good reactive cards, kind of Paths, Fatal Pushes, Spell Pierces, or something that you can play for 1, maybe that's. I hear what you're saying. I think I agree with you though that that's just not how you want to spend your 3rd turn right now. The format might evolve. You know, it's been known to do that a fair bit. But part of the problem with Coalition Relic right now is that Abrupt Decay is just the splash damage there is brutal,
You don't, like, there's ancient grudges, and there's artifact removal all over the place. Like people just have main deck Kasali Pride Mage, or they have main deck. Culligan's Command is totally devastating to get hit by.
Oh, and especially for this amount of mana.
Right.
Yeah,
so I just think that it's hard. It's a hard time right now for artifacts in decks that are not all in on the artifact thing. Like the format's already so paranoid about Ensnaring Bridge or Ravager or whatever that if you just drop a Coalition Relic, they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll spend 1 mana and grudge it or whatever. But it's got places, it's got times and ways in which I think that the recipe for it is that you particularly value the 5-color nature of it and the double ramping that it provides. Because, for instance, if you drop it on turn 3, boom, you've got Hive Mind mana or Primeval Titan mana on turn 4. And if you're playing it alongside stuff like, for instance, Mox Opal, it's actually just not out of the question at all to be. It's like it could be very normal, like a very normal draw to be able to drop the Coalition Relic on turn 3. Coalition Relic on turn 2 with a Mox Opal and one other artifact, perhaps something you played on turn 1, and then on turn 3 drop a 6-drop.
Yeah. That would be very powerful. I don't think that the format is going to go in that direction, but for exactly the reasons that you were saying. It's just, for want of a better term, just paranoid because of Lantern, because of Affinity. I think that it's going to stay that way until we see like real solidification of the format in another direction.
Yes. But Courser of Kruphix, I think that one's already it's already in a fringe place, but I think its stock is big on the rise. So, a couple of exciting cards that have definitely been a part of an awful lot of fun decks
and really good decks, including Pro Tour winning decks on the part of Courser of Kruphix. Yeah,
and Guillaume Wafo-Tapa with Coalition Relic.
Yeah. Well,
back in the Time Spiral block.
Well, there you go. This is mono power. So, a couple of Pro Tour winners then. I think, I lost in the finals of PPTQ not that long ago when there were 2 Courser of Kruphix in play. That was a terrible feeling, and that card is only going to get better, I think, with the recent unbannings of Jace the Mind Sculptor and Bloodbraid Elf.
Well, good stuff, man. Thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in this, for this special Masters 25 preview. We'll be back with our regular episode on Thursday.
Tomorrow.
Maybe Friday, actually, yeah.
Whatever the version of tomorrow is. Like, if you didn't download this the day it came out, it's probably already out there.
Yeah, so check us out, Top Level Podcast.
All right, cool. See you tomorrow, Patrick.
See you then, Michael J.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive to gain the love. It kept me alive. Visions of better weather.